They used to sit on the same bench after college, sharing tea and impossible dreams. One wanted to build things that touched the sky. The other wanted to be loved by one person forever. Somehow they believed those dreams wouldn't collide. The engineer was the quieter of the two. He listened more than he spoke. When he fell in love, he did it carefully, the way he did everything, slowly, seriously, imagining a future before he ever spoke about it. He trusted his friend enough to tell him everything, the late-night conversations, the nervous excitement, the plans he was too afraid to act on. His friend listened, encouraged him, laughed with him, told him to take his time. And then, one day, the girl stopped answering the engineer's calls. At first, he thought it was nothing. Life happened. People got busy. But silence has a way of stretching itself until it becomes impossible to ignore. When the truth finally surfaced, it didn't arrive with shouting or confrontation. It arrived quietly, wrapped in betrayal. She told him she had grown close to someone else. She didn't need to say the name. The friend didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply vanished, out of conversations, out of shared spaces, out of the engineer's life, taking the girl with him as if she had never been borrowed in the first place. That was the moment something shifted, not into anger, into memory. And memory, for an engineer, is where plans begin. Years passed. The town forgot the triangle. The friend returned wealthy, confident, married to the girl he had taken without asking. The engineer returned different, sharper, quieter, frighteningly precise. He became the man people trusted with failures they didn't want to imagine yet. So when the richest developer in town announced a project, 2 identical towers, twin symbols of success, and hired the best engineer to design them, irony did not knock. It kicked the door down. The engineer smiled. He congratulated his old friend. He joked about destiny. He even teased, funny how life brings people back together. And then he began planning. Not destruction. That would be crude. He planned collapse, the slow, invisible kind. He adjusted nothing that would fail immediately. That would be noticed. He changed things that would only matter later, load assumptions that depended on perfect maintenance, systems that required impossible compliance, dependencies that looked harmless on paper, the kind of details only an engineer would understand, and only years later. He joked to himself while working. "It's not sabotage," he'd whisper. "It's optimism." The towers were completed, praised, occupied. The friend moved his company into one and lived near the top of the other. Journalists called the buildings unshakable. The engineer said nothing. Years later, on a quiet morning, the friend stood in his office, calling his wife. The call was short, ordinary. He complained about meetings. She complained about silence. They laughed the way couples do when they've already said everything important years ago. Nobody told them it was the last normal call they would ever have, not because of death, because of exposure. By afternoon, alarms began, not fire alarms, but legal ones. Inspectors arrived, auditors followed, systems were flagged, evacuation notices issued, floors cleared, employees confused. The towers weren't burning, but they were condemned. The friend watched from the street as his life emptied floor by floor. The engineer stood across the road, unnoticed. As the hours passed, something changed in the air around the twin towers. It started as a faint haze, easy to dismiss, almost polite. Smoke curled from places no one could quite point to, thin enough that people assumed it would clear. It didn't. Every hour, it thickened. What began as a whisper became a presence. Gray turned to black, black turned heavy. The towers looked less like buildings and more like exhausted giants struggling to breathe. Inside, alarms echoed endlessly, their voices hoarse from repeating the same warning no one fully understood anymore. People moved faster, then slower, then not at all. Emergency lights painted everything in sickly red and amber, as if the buildings themselves were bleeding light. Smoke slipped through hallways, stairwells, offices, claiming space inch by inch, hour by hour. From the outside, the city watched. From rooftops, from streets, from across the river, people stood frozen, staring upward as the smoke climbed higher than the skyline, swallowing the towers floor by floor. The sun disappeared behind it. Daylight dimmed into something closer to dusk. The wife stood on a nearby rooftop, phone clutched in both hands. She had called him again and again. No ringing, no voicemail, just silence where a voice used to live. She could see the building clearly from where she stood. Smoke poured from it endlessly now, thick and unstoppable, rolling into the sky like a storm that refused to move on. She searched the windows without knowing what she was searching for. A sign, a miracle, anything. Hours later, someone touched her shoulder. They didn't use his name at first. They spoke softly, carefully, the way people do when words are about to break something forever. They told her there was no response. They told her they had tried everything. They told her he didn't suffer, though no one there could truly know that. Behind them, the towers still stood, blackened silhouettes against a sky that no longer looked like morning. She didn't scream. She didn't fall. She just kept looking, kept staring at the building where his last ordinary phone call had ended, where his voice had vanished into smoke.